Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I'm your host Maham Hashmi, and this is your news, weather, and sports update for 12 o'clock. The provincial government unveiled a plan today to finance more units of affordable housing to those vulnerable in the community. Reporter Angelina Mintz has the story.
The provincial government has partnered with the Community Land Trust and City of Burnaby to preserve 425 units of affordable cooperative housing. BC Housing and the City of Burnaby have both made significant financial contributions toward the project, and Burnaby Mayor Mike Hurley says he's glad to have new projects as cooperative housing plays an essential role in the housing mix for the community. Executive Director of the Community Land Trust, Tiffany Dutzia, notes this is a historic achievement for the organization. The CLT has 2,863 cooperative homes in their portfolio, plus 19 additional retail units. Angelina Mintz, 1680 The Crow.
Our reporter Angelina Mintz is joining us live now. So Angelina, what was the announcement about?
So the announcement made by the provincial government today is promising $500 million that will be going into a fund. So that will give grants as needed to nonprofit organizations to buy affordable housing units like older buildings, to protect the renters there from big buyers and big investors buying those buildings and then tearing them down. So really it's just to protect renters for affordable housing so it doesn't add to the homeless population.
And how long is this fund expected to last? Is it just for this year?
So the $500 million fund, Premier Eby said, is coming out of the budget for this fiscal year. So that is just for this year, but he noted as the plan goes and as the project goes along, they'll readdress how much it's working and how much more they need to dedicate or how much less they need to dedicate based on the results they're seeing.
All right, thank you, Angelina. Canada's largest Muslim youth group is launching a cross-Canada tour to educate Canadians on Islam. Our reporter Chadis Leo has the details.
Over 1,000 cities and towns will now be expecting a visit in 2023 from the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association. The association is the largest Muslim youth group of its kind in Canada, with over 90 local chapters across the country. Through the anticipated interactive tour, Muslim youth will present a two-way dialogue with Canadian residents in order to share their culture and perspective with all Canadians. This national tour will give the opportunity to anyone to ask questions about Islam directly from Muslims. No dates for the Lower Mainland have been announced yet, but the public can stay updated by logging into exploreislam.ca. Chadis Leo, 1680 The Crow.
Criminals are posing as homeowners through renting out properties and selling them in Toronto. Toronto police are investigating a second case of a home being listed for sale without the homeowner's knowledge. Just last week, Toronto police were investigating a similar case where the house actually ended up getting sold. Fortunately for the Walsh family, they caught onto the scam in time and were able to stop it. The family claims that there is a deep problem with the real estate agency that needs to be addressed. A Prince George pulp company is permanently closing its line with 300 jobs lost. The company that is called Canfor says that the pulp line at its Prince George pulp and paper mill will be phased out by the end of March. The move comes as several forestry companies around the world are downsizing their operations due to changes in the market. Canfor President Kevin Edgson says the lack of raw material for creating market pulp led to the decision. A First Nation in Saskatchewan says ground-penetrating radar has discovered more than 2,000 areas of interest at the site of one of the longest-running residential schools in the country. The Star Blanket Cree Nation, about 100 kilometers northeast of Regina, was home to one of the first 3 industrial schools to open in Canada.
Now we have to come up with a strategy on how we're going to determine what's a stone, what's a piece of wood, what's gravel, or what that might be actually something.
The facility was run by the Roman Catholic Church from 1884 to 1973 and operated for another 25 years until it closed in 1998. The head of the search project says his team is looking at options, including DNA testing, but says they don't believe all 2,000 sites are unmarked graves. Ontario provincial police are set to provide an update on the case of an abducted woman 1 year after her disappearance. Elnaz Haj Tamari's family said they are holding out hope that she will return one day. Reporter Emily Javeski from the Canadian Press brings the story.
The OPP have said 37-year-old Elnaz Haj Tamiri was abducted by 3 men dressed in police gear on the night of January 12, 2022, from a relative's house in Wasaga Beach, Ontario. Police have also said that Haj Tamiri was assaulted with a frying pan in an underground parking lot in Richmond Hill in December 2021. Charges have been laid in both cases against Haj Tamiri's ex-boyfriend, Mohammed Lilo, and York police have also charged 2 other men in the December case, but investigators are still looking for the 3 men who abducted her. Emily Joveski, the Canadian Press.
Ontario Provincial Police are offering a $100,000 reward to anyone with information that will lead to the location of the 37-year-old woman. A Quebec police officer told a trial today that a couple from New York were kidnapped and smuggled into Quebec in 2020 because of a drug deal involving their grandson. Investigator Guillaume Poirier is on the stand in the trial of Gary Arnold, a Quebec man facing 7 charges in an alleged conspiracy to abduct James and Sandra Helm. The couple in their 70s were taken from their home, New York, on September 27, 2020, and discovered by police 2 days later in Magog, Quebec. Poirier says that 6 days before their abduction, the couple's grandson, Mackenzie Helm, was arrested in the United States by the Drug Enforcement Administration with 50 kilograms of cocaine on him. James and Sandra Helm were transported by boat into Quebec through the First Nations territory of Akwesasne before they were taken to a chalet in Magog, where they were freed after 2 days by a provincial police tactical unit. The streets were shut down in North Vancouver on Sunday as large crowds from the Iranian community marched through the rain. 3 years have passed since a Ukrainian flight carrying 176 passengers from Tehran, the capital of Iran, to Kiev was shot down. Among them, 85 heading home to Canada. The story is told by Amelia Francis Fincham.
For one grieving father, it was all too much to attend the march on Sunday. Vahid Amami remembers the day vividly when he lost his wife and 5-year-old daughter. With tensions rising in Iran, many people are afraid of what may happen to their family back home if they speak out against the regime. However, Amami says all his family has left now is to fight.
It's dangerous in Iran, but I know they're fighting because they don't have anything to lose. They lost whatever they have. They're fighting for freedom and for justice.
The rally on Sunday was one of many across Canada. Organizers hope the attention it gains will motivate government officials to put more pressure on the Iranian regime. For Amami, losing 4 family members that day was very hard, but staying silent now means the regime wins. Amelia Francis Fincham, 1680 The Crow.
Canadian oil sand companies are hoping technology used by NASA on Mars could help reduce emissions from their facilities. Wes Jickling with the oil sands industry group Pathways Alliance says the optical imaging system used on the Mars rover to search for signs of ancient life on that planet could be adapted to search for trace amounts of solvents in bitumen. Using these solvents instead of steam in oil sand extractions would significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
We're looking at 20% reduction in GHG all the way up to 90% reduction in GHG by using these solvents in some cases. So the potential is huge.
The Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction will be releasing updated guidance next week on how much alcohol Canadians should be drinking while maintaining their health. Aaron Hoban is a senior scientist at Ontario Public Health and a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee responsible for reviewing the evidence on the new guidance. She says the recommended drop to 2 drinks a week from 2 drinks a day is based on the multiple health risks associated with alcohol, even at low levels. Advocates say government could promote healthier consumption by mandating warning labels about health risks on alcohol containers. A storm that caused considerable flooding in California is now bearing down in BC. Rain and wind warnings are in effect for much of Vancouver Island as well as inner south coast. We will be back after a short break with your sports news.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikka-King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikka-King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
This is sports on 1680 The Crow.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Maham Hashmi, and this is your sports update for 12 p.m. The Canucks are back in action tonight to take on the Tampa Bay Lightning in Florida. The Canucks look to shake off Tuesday's loss to the Pittsburgh Penguins, where they blew a 3-goal lead. Canucks coach Bruce Boudreau spoke after the morning skate about the challenges the Tampa Bay Lightning present.
So it's going to be a real challenge. We're going to need everybody at the top of their game, and if they're not, then sometimes bad things happen.
In other Canucks news, the team's forward Tanner Pearson will miss the rest of the season due to an ongoing hand injury. General manager Patrick Alvin announced Thursday that the 30-year-old left winger has undergone a second surgery after experiencing a setback in his recovery. Pearson hasn't played since Vancouver's 5-2 loss to the Montreal Canadiens back in November. The 6'1", 201-pound forward had 5 points in 14 appearances for the Canucks this season. Originally picked 30th overall by LA in the 2012 draft, Pearson has split 10 NHL seasons between the Kings, Canucks, and Pittsburgh Penguins. The Canucks continue a 5-game road trip Thursday against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Toronto Maple Leafs travel to Detroit tonight to take on the Detroit Red Wings. The team is looking to get another win after beating the Predators last night. Mitch Marner scored on a power play with 75 seconds left in regulation as the Toronto Maple Leafs downed the Nashville Predators 2-1. Star player Austin Matthews was out with an injury and is not expected to play tonight. Leafs head coach Sheldon Keefe says Matthews is day-to-day with an undisclosed injury. The Toronto Raptors will host the Charlotte Hornets today at the Scotiabank Arena. The Raptors are looking to get their first 3-game win streak since the start of the season. The team is hoping to secure a spot in the playoffs as they're currently on the outside looking in. Rivals Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal have been placed on opposite halves of the Australian Open bracket in the draw, meaning the owners of a combined 43 Grand Slam singles title could only meet in the final at Melbourne Park. Djokovic is a 9-time champion in Australia. He returns to the hardcore tournament after missing it last year when his visa was revoked and he was deported from the country because he isn't vaccinated against COVID-19. Fourth-seeded Djokovic will open his bid for a 10th Australian Open title against Spaniard Roberto Carballes Baena in the tournament, which begins Monday. IGA Swiatek, the women's number 1 ranked player, takes on Julie Neimer in the opening round. The NFL announced that if the Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs play in the AFC Championship game, then the game will be held at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. This was suggested after the cancellation of the Cincinnati Bengals and Bills game in Week 17, where Bills player Damar Hamlin was stretchered off. In more football news, Las Vegas Raiders quarterback Derek Carr wrote a farewell post on his social media this morning, saying goodbye to the fans. Carr was behind the last 2 games of the season by the Raiders, who finished 6-11 this year. Carr joined the Raiders as a second-round pick in 2014, throwing for 35,222 yards, 217 touchdowns, and 99 interceptions in 142 games. The Raiders only made the playoffs twice in Carr's tenure with the team. And these were your sports updates for 12 p.m., folks. Stay tuned for the comment coming up next. I'm your host, Maham Hashmi, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. Now it's time for the comment.
Welcome to the comment here at 1680 The Crow. As we covered earlier this week, supporters of ex-Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro stormed the Brazilian Congress on Sunday. But while the protesters are acting on years-long stream of lies and manipulation from the former president, they also fit into a pattern of protests that happened over the last decade. In 2013, there were protests over government corruption, and in 2016, protests related to Dilma Rousseff's impeachment took over the country. And now we witness a third wave of violent protests. The protesters were asking for a military intervention to end democracy because they don't see the results of the last presidential election as legit. However, Bolsonaro's administration happened over the legal agenda that is threatening white-collar impunity. On the other hand, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's administration indicates the return of many politicians implicated in the Petrobras scandal, and this includes the president himself. What I'm trying to say here is that a huge change from both left-wing and right-wing government is needed to get Brazil back on track. The solution should be building it from scratch, but we all know that it's not possible. Thanks for listening to the comment. I'm Silvia Sena here at 1680 The Crow.
It's extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Crow Chronicles. I'm Abby.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Sebastian.
So this past weekend, we went to the Vancouver Aquarium. I've only actually been there once before, and it was like way before COVID when they still had beluga whales and stuff. They don't have whales anymore, which is good or bad, whatever you think. But they have a stellar sea lion instead, which is cool.
It was my first time too. I love watching the jellyfish tank. That was really hypnotic to watch.
I also really enjoyed seeing the jellyfish and watching the sea lion show as well.
Did you guys know that the Vancouver Aquarium first opened back in 1956?
Yeah, so today we're talking about that moment in BC history, the opening of the Vancouver Aquarium.
Oh, yeah. So the way the aquarium got started, so talking about the 1950s, right? World War II was over. There's this kind of optimism in the U.S. and Canada. And a Vancouver insurance man, so he was a businessman, not a biologist, kept tropical saltwater fish at home as a hobby. Well, that was very hard to do in the 1950s, because you couldn't go out. If you were tropical saltwater fish, somebody had to go collect them in Fiji or Tonga or Australia and ship them to you. He believed that Vancouver, as a growing metropolis, needed an aquarium, because all the great cities had one: Chicago, San Francisco, New York, Seattle, and Vancouver didn't have an aquarium. So he said, well, Vancouver needs an aquarium. So he led a community movement to get an aquarium established. And that the trick to getting the aquarium established was that he convinced all three levels of government to put up $100,000 each if the other level of government would put up $100,000. And he was a very politically astute guy. And so he started with the premier of BC, and the premier said, sure, I'll do it, because the feds are never going to do it. And then he got the mayor of Vancouver to say, who said the same thing, the feds will never do it. But he already knew that the feds would do it. And so the aquarium was built with that $300,000 and a lot of community support. And it opened on June 15th, 1956.
So that was John Nightingale, the second director of the Vancouver Aquarium who we spoke to. We learned that the Vancouver Aquarium is the oldest and the first public aquarium that opened in Canada, and it has become one of the 5 largest aquariums in North America.
It's huge, and it's located in one of the most iconic spots in Vancouver.
Yeah, did you know that Stanley Park wasn't actually the only location considered for the aquarium?
So Mayor Hume, who was the Vancouver mayor of the day, decided that's where it was going to be. That's not where anybody wanted it. The park board didn't want it there. Some of the city councilors didn't want it there. The aquarium didn't really want it there. But the mayor said that's where it's going. Because there used to be a zoo, a free zoo in Stanley Park, occupying the area up from what's now the train that runs at Christmas time and at Halloween down to the aquarium. There were zoo exhibits scattered around that landscape. And so the zoo was already there. So Mayor Hume said, well, this is kind of like a fishy piece of the zoo, put it in Stanley Park. And he made the decision personally. Some people wanted it to go down by somewhere near where the Vancouver Museum is. And back then, Falls Creek, of course, was lumber mills. It was industrial. And somebody thought right at the end of right next to where the aquatic center is, sort of between the Burrard and would be just east of the Burrard Bridge.
The Vancouver Public Aquarium Association from UBC, founded in 1950, also had a role in the opening of the aquarium. We talked to Andrew Tribe, a marine mammal research unit professor at UBC, who shared the experience of one of the members of the association at the time.
They started it from thinking about needing access to do research where they could have saltwater tanks, a place to care for things. And I think that was combined. So I think certainly the research community from UBC was very central to that, but also with someone like Murray Newman, who also had his eye on the public and the need for public education. And I think it was a good combination. I think that probably also helped to steer the direction so that over the years that research was always one of the pillars of what they did. And animals were not there for one's entertainment, but to educate.
Oh, I had no idea about any of that. I wonder what the implications of the aquarium's opening had on tourism in Vancouver at the time.
That's a great question, Abby. It was definitely very busy when we visited over the weekend. John Nightingale said when the aquarium first opened, it was only the size of the tropics room, which is only a 9,000 square foot facility. I can't imagine the crowd when 10,000 people showed up for the opening weekend.
Well, it was highly anticipated, the opening. In fact, I have a good friend who's now in his 80s who was a child standing holding his mother's hand in that opening day lineup to get into the aquarium. They had 10,000 people on the first day went through the aquarium. It was a lot smaller than it is today. So it was right from the get-go, it was very publicly popular and helped put Vancouver on the map in a number of different ways.
When we went last Saturday, the place was packed with families. You could hear kids all by the different animals, especially during the sea lion show. We were really impressed by that too. The show wasn't only about tricks and jumps, it was also very educational. The hosts talk about the relationship that trainers and animals have and how important it is for making sure the animals are healthy.
Yeah, I really loved how centered the Vancouver Aquarium is around education. Besides the sea lion show, there were also many other opportunities to learn about marine life through displays and murals and pictures and interactive screens. It really seems as though this has been the aquarium's top priority since the beginning.
You don't need to be a diver to observe marine life, that they've recreated different habitats, different parts of the ocean, and you can see firsthand what's there. And so I think that's been a very important part. It's allowed people to see marine mammals up close and to learn about them in different ways. They were the first to bring a killer whale into captivity, and as a result, changed the world's attitudes and perception, understandings about killer whales, because people got to see them up close. Before that, everybody was terrified of them, and there were efforts even to remove them and to kill them because people were afraid of them. And now they are the mascots or heroes of the marine life here. So they played a role in changing public perceptions. And I think, the public, we tend to love and care for things that we know or that we've seen, and to be told that we should care about fish that we've never seen and can't relate to, or let's say a killer whale that we can't relate to, it's very difficult. But once people get to know them, and I think the aquarium provides a means to get to know marine life in a way that one cannot do by walking along a beach or looking out over the ocean.
I like that the Vancouver Aquarium tries to teach you when you visit instead of being like an amusement park. It also feels like other public aquariums across the province that opened up afterwards took inspiration from the Vancouver Aquarium too.
Toronto has Ripley's, whatever, believe it or not, and they've got something, and that was much later when that opened up. And then, then there's in Marineland, or is it what do they call it? Marineland, isn't it, in Niagara Falls, which I've never seen, but that one opened up. And I guess, when I think of these other two, I guess I've seen them being more as set up as a tourist destination. And I think one thing that the Vancouver Aquarium stood out for was, yes, it recognized that tourists would come, but it seemed to be designed to be part of the community and to be a community aquarium and to provide information, promote conservation of marine life, and show what we don't see under the surface. So I think that its approach wasn't private in the sense of making money. I think a big part of its mandate was education, promoting conservation, and ultimately supporting research as well. There are now some other community-based aquariums in British Columbia. So there's one in Ucluelet. They've got a small one up in Campbell River, and I know there's one in Seashelt as well, or Gibson's, I guess is where it is. And they're very, very cool because they're very small and it's very community-based. But they're very neat.
After visiting the aquarium, I definitely realized that it's a really important place for education on marine life, on top of being a fun place to see all the fish and mammals up close. And I think this is especially important for BC because we're surrounded by water and marine life in nature. So as we spoke to John Nightingale, he also shared how the aquarium impacted him personally.
Academic training was as a scientist and happened to be with salmon, and part of that training in graduate school involved a lot of talking to the public and to school kids, and I came to understand that people are really interested in the oceans and nature. But a lot of people just don't have a pathway, or they don't have the access. And so aquariums seem to me to be a pretty perfect way to engage ordinary people who just have an interest but don't have any background or any technical knowledge. So I've pretty much spent my whole career working in and out of aquariums and museums a little bit. And so I came to Vancouver on purpose when the original director announced his retirement. The aquarium at that point was 37 years old. He announced his retirement, so he'd been the director for a long time. That's a long time to hold the job. And so I came to Vancouver on purpose because of the Vancouver Aquarium. So it was a very significant part of my life, and it's a very significant part of what I believe we should be doing to combat climate change and loss of biodiversity and other things.
I really enjoy learning about the history of the aquarium. It gave me a new perspective on the role these places have when it comes to teaching to new generations about how crucial it is to taking care of animals that you have in front of you. And I think it's also crucial for researchers like Andrew and the Marine Mammal Research Institute team.
I can talk from my side, where we've done a lot of research with primarily sea lions and northern fur seals and also harbor seals. And so it's been a collaborative effort where we have the ideas for what the research is, but then we need to have animal trainers that can help get the animals to do what's needed to do the research, because we can't collect any data from a sea lion that it doesn't want to do willingly. We can't force it. They're just too big, too strong. And plus, if you do force an animal, you're just going to stress it out, and then your data won't be of any use. So we have to be able to collect data in a way that the animal cooperates 100%, is completely relaxed. And that's where the trainers ensure that those are the conditions under which the animals participate. So at the same time, the aquarium doesn't have the expertise to do the research themselves, but we've got graduate students here, undergraduate students, and just such a depth of knowledge to run those sorts of things. So the university doesn't have the facilities to care for these animals. And so it worked out very well. And then the third aspect in here was the fact that the public got to hear about the research. They would understand why the animals were there, what we're learning from them, and what they're teaching us, and what we're taking back to the field to help conserve marine mammals in the wild.
What I learned was that the salmon plushies at the gift shop are only $20. I mean, that's such a steal. $20 for a salmon plushie? Come on. No, but really, what I learned was how lucky I was to grow up on the West Coast, where I saw a lot of those animals in the wild naturally, like, all the time. I also learned more about how the aquarium came to be and the 3 levels of government the original director, Murray Newman, had to go through to open it. Well, thanks for listening to this episode of The Crow Chronicles.
Be sure to follow BCIT Journalism on Twitter and BCIT News on Instagram.
I'm Abby.
I'm Caitlin.
I'm Sebastian.
Bye!